You're watching Capital City Sunday.
Vice President Kamala Harris's visit to Milwaukee marks her fifth campaign stop to the battleground state this year. The city maintains the largest percentage of black voters in Wisconsin. The vice president also made a campaign stop in Indianapolis on Wednesday, where she gave the keynote speech at a historically black sororities convention before heading to Houston. Large coalitions within the black voter base quickly organized Zoom calls to announce their support for Harris on Sunday, just hours after the vice president received Biden's endorsement. More than 44,000 people joined a Zoom call to back Harris, raising close to $1.5 million. A poll released by the New York Times on Thursday shows a tight race between Vice President Harris and former President Donald Trump, with Trump leading Harris by just 1%. The margin of error was 3.3 percentage points. But what role will black voters, a critical voting bloc, play in deciding the November election? And joining me on the show this morning is Shavon Arline-Bradley, President and CEO of the National Council of Negro Women. Shavon, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So, Shavon, I just want to touch base with you. Last Sunday, we saw President Joe Biden announcing plans to step out of the race and ultimately endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris. Can you talk about the first 48 hours after that announcement for your organization and the efforts that took place to back the vice president?
Well, first of all, thanks for the conversation and opportunity. The first 48 hours, it was a blur. It was a surreal moment. One of the things that really came to pass for us as an organization is that we, like many others, are a national nonprofit, which means we can't endorse any candidates. But I would have to tell you, the magnitude of the moment of history really energized black women across this country. NCNW specifically had the opportunity to launch what we call our 8-state all-state strategy. So in the first 48 hours, we had over 5,000 members of our organization, which is made up of 37 national black women's organizations, as well as over 300 sections or chapters across the country. We're mobilizing around voter empowerment, voter engagement, and most importantly, voter registration and GOTV efforts for voter protection. And so our collective advocacy allowed us not only to gather immediately, but also to have the national presence of the Divine Nine sororities, our faith organizations, the Links Incorporated, Jack and Jill, civic organizations, and civil rights leaders come together and begin to define where we will focus our get out the vote efforts to ensure that young people get out the vote.
If Harris ultimately moves forward as the Democratic nominee, it would mean a lot more visibility and representation for historically black colleges and sororities. Can you give us just a little bit of history on the significance there and how crucial that support within the black voter base will be for her?
Well, I want to be very clear. Black women have been the most consistent voter bloc in the last 2 to 3 elections, particularly as it looks for moderate issues in this country. And so the HBCU connection, as well as the Divine Nine, is massively critical. I'm a member of the Divine Nine as well. I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta. Madam Vice President is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha. What that means is the Divine Nine was these organizations were founded on college campuses, some predominantly white institutions and some at Howard University and Morgan State, of course. Well, these organizations gathered around core issues for social, political, and economic impact for the black community. This group of literally now almost 5 to 7 million leaders across the country of college-educated African Americans centered around social justice issues. We do service in the community, but we also advance policy, advance those issues that are important to us. And voter turnout is one of the primary areas that we focus. Now, HBCU connections are massive. Many of the Divine Nine organization members that join on HBCU campuses. Of course, the HBCU network is a vast network. And what is really different about that experience is that black students are not only trained in their craft and industry, but also reared in understanding the importance of history, as well as social justice and advocacy. So there's an obligation that many of us have to be able to give back, but also to take our seat at the table to ensure political power is geared towards those that have been, majority of those that have been oppressed for generations. And I think that her opportunity to be the nominee actually changes the trajectory of our country.
Shavon, Black voter enthusiasm was a big part of the conversation, and it has been talked about a lot in battleground states like Wisconsin. Will there be any challenges for Harris in garnering support among those still undecided or swing state voters?
It's a great question. I think what the country is seeing is two things. One, we're seeing a massive amount of energy, and the energy is really coming from someone who represents not only marginalized spaces for women and persons of color, but also a change in trajectory as it relates to which candidates are now in the play or are in play to be considered for president of the United States. Not only are swing state voters and those that are still undecided still going to look and try to find out what is Madam Vice President's platform. What I can tell your listeners is that what we all know is that this current administration is a Biden-Harris administration. So those areas around healthcare, economics, around criminal justice reform, advancing opportunities for capping insulin costs, opportunities to inform Medicaid unwinding, looking at voting rights and voter rights as a priority, issues around Roe v. Wade, and as well as affirmative action. These are issues that have been important to this administration. And what I just want to offer those that are listening, swing state voters are voters that are really trying to figure out where do their values align. And this current administration is where this vice president has already served. I think sometimes people misconstrue this, that she is some kind of out of the blue, coming out of nowhere. Madam Vice President was already in position, has already served as the second highest leader in our entire country's governmental system. And I think voters in these states will have to come to grips with, are they feeling good about all of the changes that were made in this administration, and or are they considering supporting President Trump? So I think it's going to be a major toss-up. It's anyone's race, but I would have to say the energy across the country with a multi-generational, multi-ethnic, multi-background coalition, I think it's going to change the electorate, and I think turnout will be everything.
Shavon Arline-Bradley, President and CEO of the National Council of Negro Women. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
It was wonderful to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity.